"Civilians stay off the field." The voice came across 60 yards of cut grass with a bullhorn's worth of carry and no bullhorn behind it. Major Dalton Prescott was 30 feet out and closing, clipboard under one arm, cover squared. The rehearsal formation halted in place behind him because he had halted it in place to do this. The woman stopped. She was 51 years old, blonde hair pulled back tight and pinned, a plain gray coat unbuttoned, a paper visitor badge clipped at the lapel, the kind the gate hands out 400 times a day. She favored her left leg. Not a limp exactly. More a decision she made about where to put her weight, made fresh with every step. It was the 19th of July, 2026, and it was 84 degrees on a cut grass parade field with a full corps review on it in the morning. She had come out of the far gate at 1400 hours and walked the length of the review field alone, and she had walked it strangely. Not wandering, not sightseeing. She had gone down the center of it in slow, measured steps, and at the flank she had stopped where the salute battery's 6 guns sat in a row, with their trails on the grass, and she had stood there for a full minute, looking down the line the way a person looks down a rifle. "Understood," she said. Prescott waited for the rest. There was always a rest. There was always a reason, an appointment, a son in the formation, a company that had sent her. She looked back down the gun line one more time. "Your interval's short." The whole thing took perhaps 2 seconds. Prescott's face went through the small, ugly change that a certain kind of man's face makes when a person he has already filed away says something he does not have an answer for. "Are you crazy, lady? Get off my field." "Yes, sir," she said. She turned and went. She did not argue. She did not ask for anyone. She walked back down the center of the field the same measured way she had come, and she did not look at the reviewing stand once, not going and not coming, and she went out through the rope at the family's end and kept walking. 406 people were on that field. Every one of them watched her leave. One man watched how. Command Sergeant Major Isaiah Nunley was 50 years old and had been a soldier for 31 of them, and he was standing at the reviewing stand with the arrival honors packet under his arm when the major started shouting. He did not move. He watched her go, and he counted her steps, which was a thing his feet had been doing on their own since basic training, and the number he got he did not like. 30 inches. Every one of them. Dead on, the whole length of the field, on a leg that clearly hurt her. That is not how a person walks. That is how a person walks, who has been taught to, a long time ago, by somebody who cared very much that she learn it. Nunley put that in the front of his mind and left it there. Then he noticed the second thing, which was the ground. She had spent the entire walk looking at the ground. Not at the stand, not at the flags, not at the formation. At the grass. The way a woman looks at ground, she intends to stand on. The third thing was at the tree line. 2 men in civilian jackets were standing at the edge of the field, 60 yards off in the shade. They had been standing there for 40 minutes. They did not talk to each other. They did not check their phones. In 40 minutes on a warm July afternoon, neither of them had sat down, and there was a bench 11 feet away. When the woman reached them, they fell in, one on either side, and the 3 of them walked to a plain sedan, parked with its nose out, and got in without a word. Nunley had been a soldier for 31 years. He knew what men who never sat down were for. Behind him, the rehearsal came back to life. Prescott got the formation moving and got his rhythm back, and before the hour was out, he had told the story twice, once to his executive officer and once to the band, and it improved both times. Staff Sergeant Ruben Ocampo, 31 years old, chief of section on the salute battery, waited until the major had moved off down the field. Then he took a tape from his cargo pocket and walked his gun line and measured it. The interval was short, 11 inches short, on guns 2 through 6, the accumulated drift of 4 days of setting up on grass and dragging trails back into place by eye. Nobody in the reviewing stand would have seen it. Nobody in the formation would have seen it. It would have shown up in exactly one place, which is the photograph, in the line of 6 tubes going away from the camera with the last 2 crowding each other. Ocampo coiled the tape and put it back in his pocket. He looked across the empty field at the gate the woman had walked out of. 60 yards of grass, and a rope, and a major's voice still hanging over all of it. She had been standing there a minute. She had not walked the line. She had not put a tape on anything. She had looked down at once, the way you look down a rifle, and she had got it in one. He did not tell the major anything. She came back at first light. 0600 hours. Review day -1. The grass silver with dew and the 6 guns of the salute battery sitting in a row on the flank of the field, with their tubes still cold. Ocampo had his section on them and was walking them through the sequence dry, and when he turned around, she was standing 8 feet behind the trail of gun 3 with her hands in her coat pockets. Same coat. Same badge. Inside the rope this time, on the battery's side, which was where guests were allowed to be and where nobody had ever chosen to stand. Ocampo said, "Ma'am, good morning." She said, "Morning." He waited. She did not fill the space. In Ocampo's experience, a civilian standing at a gun line at 6 in the morning filled the space with everything they had ever heard about artillery. She did not say anything at all for about a minute and a half, and she watched 3 rounds of the dry drill, and then she asked her first question. "How long between rounds?" 5 seconds, ma'am." "What does the packet say?" Ocampo had the packet in the cargo pocket with the tape. He took it out and checked, and it said 5 seconds, and he told her so. "Good," she said. She did not say the other thing. Ocampo knew there was another thing, because she looked at gun 6 for a moment longer than she had looked at the rest, and gun 6 was the one he had been worried about since Tuesday. Then she asked the second question. "What do you do if a round fails to fire?" He gave her the drill. "Wait the prescribed time. Do not open the breech. Signal the chief of section. The whole thing. Clean. The way it had been beaten into him at the schoolhouse." "What do you do if the last one fails?" Ocampo opened his mouth and closed it. Because the answer for the last round is different. Because a salute is not a number of rounds. It is a number the audience hears. And if the 19th round of a 19-gun salute goes silent, then the honor rendered was 18, and 18 is not a thing. 18 belongs to nobody. He had known that once for a written test, and had never in 11 years had to hold it in his hands. He got it out eventually, most of it, and she listened to all of it without helping him, which he found he minded less than he expected. "Ma'am," he said, "are you with the Inspector General?" "No." That was all. She said it the way a person says a fact, and then she thanked him for his time and walked back toward the rope, 30 inches a step. 30 yards away, Command Sergeant Major Nunley stood at the corner of the stand with a green notebook and wrote 4 lines in it. 30-inch steps. Counts them. Asked about misfire on the last round. 2 men. Never sat down. Then he looked up, watched her go under the rope, and added 3 more. No jewelry. No unit ball cap. No lanyard. No coffee mug. Nothing on her with a name on it. Watch turned face inward on the wrist. Nunley had known exactly 2 kinds of people who wore a watch with the face on the inside of the wrist. Mechanics, so they did not smash the crystal. And aviators, so the crystal never threw light back at them through a windscreen at night. Prescott arrived at 0640 and saw a civilian inside his rope and came down the flank of the field at speed. "Sergeant, why is there a visitor on my gun line?" "She was asking about the guns, sir." She was asking about the guns, Prescott said. The guns are not a civilian's business. The guns are the one part of this that 400 people will remember. And tomorrow morning, there are 400 soldiers on this field, and one of them is going to be looked at by a general. It will not be you, Sergeant, and it will not be her. Do you understand which side of the rope you work on? Yes, sir. Good. Prescott went off down the field with his clipboard. Ocampo stood at his gun for a while. Then he got the tape out of his cargo pocket, and he walked his line, and he moved guns 2 through 6 11 inches. By mid-morning, the woman on the field had become the joke of the rehearsal. Prescott ran the sequence from the reviewing stand with a bullhorn, and he worked her into the brief as an object lesson, and the story got better every time he told it. In the telling, she had argued. In the telling, she had been told 3 times. In the telling, there had been a moment where he was not sure whether he was going to have her removed. If you let one civilian walk your field, Prescott said, and the bullhorn carried it into the barracks and back. Then by the time the guns fire, you have 40 of them, and a review that looks like a county fair. Some of them laughed. Not all. But a bullhorn makes a laugh sound like a formation laughing, and that is enough. Corporal Wyatt Deschler was 22 years old, and on the color guard detail, and standing in the front rank, and he laughed. And then he added something to it, because he was 22. Maybe she was just looking for the bingo hall, sir. 2 men near him laughed. One did not. The one who did not was a specialist named on nobody's list, who had pushed his own mother through a commissary in a wheelchair for 2 years, and who looked straight ahead at the flagpole and kept his mouth in a line. Prescott, from the stand, pointed the bullhorn at Deschler and said that was about the size of it, and the formation moved on to the next face, and Corporal Wyatt Deschler went on with his morning. He would remember that sentence for the rest of his career. He would remember it at his retirement. He did not know that yet. 30 yards behind the rope, in the family's viewing area, where the folding chairs were still stacked, a woman in a gray coat stood with a paper cup of coffee and listened to every word of it. She did not react. Nothing on the face. Nothing in the hands. She had been laughed at by better men than Dalton Prescott, in worse places, with an aircraft coming apart around her and the instrument panel lit up like a city. She had learned then what she used now, and what she had learned was this. The face is the only ground you always hold. Everything else can be taken. Keep the face. She finished the coffee. She folded the cup flat and put it in her coat pocket rather than leave it on the grass, because there was a review here tomorrow, and because a photograph of 400 soldiers with a paper cup in the foreground is a photograph of a paper cup. She had learned that from a colonel in 1999, who made his staff walk the grass on their hands and knees before every ceremony, and who had been, everyone agreed at the time, completely impossible to work for, and who had been right. Then she walked, 8 paces out, turn, 8 paces back, turn. She did it about 40 times. Nunley saw her from the far end and started over to introduce himself, because he had 4 lines in a green notebook and a bad feeling, and by the time he got there, she was gone. What was left was in the grass. Heel marks, 2 lines of them, out and back, evenly spaced, pressed into the wet ground by a person who had walked the same 8 paces over and over, while a major with a bullhorn made a joke about her leg. Nunley crouched down and looked at it for a while. If this is already sitting wrong in your chest, that easy laugh, that bullhorn, that woman standing there taking it with a paper cup in her hand, then stay with it, because the field is going to hear that laugh come back on it. Subscribe to Honor Tales and see who she is when the guns start. Behind him, the bullhorn cracked again, and Prescott's laugh went out across the field, and in the grass at Nunley's feet was a line of measured footprints that nobody had looked down at yet. By 1100 hours, Prescott had moved from mockery to paper. He walked into the visitor control center and asked for the badge log. The clerk pulled it up. Badge 417, issued 0942. Sponsor field blank, which happened, the clerk started to explain, when a visitor came in on a category that the local system did not generate a sponsor line for. Flag it, Prescott said. The clerk said there was a name on it. Flag it. Nobody is on that field tomorrow who is not on my list. The clerk read the name out. Prescott was already turning for the door and talking over her about the list, about who was on it and who was not, and how many people did she think tried this in a given week. And the name went into the room and out of it and landed nowhere. The clerk would be interviewed about that afternoon 4 separate times. She would say the same thing each time, which was that she read the name out loud at a normal volume from 18 inches away, and that the major did not stop talking. That was 11:20. By 11:29, the memorandum existed. Prescott wrote it himself at his own desk, which is a thing that would be read aloud later by a lawyer in a room with a flag in it. Memorandum for record. Subject: unauthorized presence on a ceremonial site. Body: that on the afternoon prior, an unidentified civilian female had entered the ceremonial area without authorization, that she had refused 2 lawful verbal instructions to depart, and that she had been escorted from the field by ceremonial detail personnel. None of it happened. She left the first time she was told. She said, "Yes, sir," and she went. Nobody escorted her. There was no detail, no escort, no refusal, no second instruction. 406 people saw it happen the other way. He typed it in 9 minutes. He read it once. He signed it and pushed it to the ceremonial distribution list. 31 addressees, because a barment is only worth something if the people at the rope have seen it. It was the only document in the entire affair that anybody would ever go to prison over. And he wrote it himself. And he signed it himself. And he sent it to 31 people. Staff Sergeant Ocampo read it at his desk at 11:50. He read it again. He had been standing 40 feet away with a tape measure in his hand. He knew what had not happened. He sat and looked at the screen for a long moment and considered several things he could do. And what he did in the end was nothing at all. He did not forward it, and he did not answer it, and he did not delete it. Not deleting it turned out to matter more than anything else he did that week. Across the installation, in a plain room in the distinguished visitor quarters, Claudia Mercer took off the coat. There was nothing under it. No jewelry, no rings, no chain, no bracelet. Nothing that would swing or catch or come off in a rotor wash. The watch was turned face inward on the wrist, where it had lived since flight school, so the crystal would never throw light back at her off a windscreen at 200 feet in the dark. She read the review schedule once, standing up, and set it face down on the desk. Somewhere in a server on that installation, a false official statement now existed with a major's name typed at the bottom of it, and 31 copies of it were sitting in 31 inboxes, and the woman it was written about didn't know it existed and wouldn't have cared. Command Sergeant Major Nunley pulled the arrival honors packet at 1500 hours because that was his job, and because he had a green notebook with 7 lines in it. Page 1, sequence of events. Page 2, the formation diagram. Page 3, the band. Page 4, arrival honors. 4 ruffles and flourishes. The honors march. Salute. 19 guns. Nunley read the line 3 times. He had run ceremonies on this installation for 11 years. He had ordered 11 guns for a brigadier general, 13 for a major general, 15 for a lieutenant general, more times than he could count, because a lieutenant general commanded this corps and lived 4 miles from where Nunley was sitting. He had ordered 17 guns twice in his life, both times for a 4-star, and both times it had taken a month of planning and 2 rehearsals. He had never in 31 years ordered 19, He had never heard 19. He had met exactly one man who had, a retired sergeant major in a folding chair at a retirement lunch, who had described it as the longest 30 seconds of his life and had not been joking. 19, he said out loud to an empty office. He called Core Protocol. Core Protocol confirmed the packet was correct as written. Nunley asked who the distinguished visitor was. Core Protocol said the name was being held until the morning of, and did not elaborate, and did not need to, because the Army holds a name until the morning of for exactly one category of visitor, and every senior non-commissioned officer in the force knows which one. Nunley sat with the phone in his hand after the line went dead. 17 guns is a 4-star general. 15 is a 3-star. 13 is a 2. 19 is a number the Army almost never fires, and the thing about 19, the thing Nunley knew and had never once had cause to use, is that it doesn't belong to generals at all. It goes up past them. It goes to the vice president. It goes to the Secretary of Defense. It goes to the secretaries of the military departments, the civilians at the top of the whole structure, the ones who are not in the chain of command, as soldiers, because they are above it as officials. 19 guns in the United States Army is the number for a civilian. Nunley put the phone down and called Major Prescott. "Sir, the woman on the field yesterday, did anybody get her name?" "She was a civilian, Sergeant Major. She's handled. Badge is flagged. She's barred. There's a memo out." "Sir, did anybody ask her name?" There was a pause on the line, and Prescott filled it with the memo, with the 2 lawful instructions, and the escort and the ceremonial detail personnel, and by the time he was finished, he seemed to believe it, which is the thing about a document, that a man will read his own back to himself until it becomes the weather. "She's barred, Sergeant Major. That's the end of it." Nunley walked out to the field at last light. He went to the families area, to the flattened grass behind the rope, and found the 2 lines of heel marks still there in the dew. He paced them himself. 8 out. Turn. 8 back. 30 inches a step, the way he had been taught in 1995 by a drill sergeant who measured it with a yardstick. 40 feet. Give or take. Nunley stood in the middle of a dark parade field with his hands on his hips and tried to think of a single thing in the United States Army that is 40 feet long and worth a woman walking the length of it 40 times with a bad leg. Here is what you do not know yet, and what nobody on that field knew. Why she walks it. Why 40 feet. Why she has been pacing that same distance on parade grounds for 15 years. It is the reason for all of this, and it is coming next. Subscribe to Honor Tales, so you are here for it. Nunley walked off the field with a number in his head he could not put down. 19. At 2200 hours, Claudia Mercer sat on the edge of the bed in the distinguished visitor quarters and worked her left knee with both hands, the way she had every night for 15 years, and let herself think about it, which she did not often do. 2011. She was 36 years old, a lieutenant colonel commanding an assault helicopter battalion, call sign Crescent, and she was in the right seat that night for the oldest reason in aviation. There was nobody left on that flight line senior enough to tell her no. A team was pinned at a river crossing. 11 people, one of them hurt badly enough that the number would be smaller by morning if the aircraft did not come. She went in low with the moon behind her, the way you do, and Chief Warrant Officer 3. Amos Rieger sat in the left seat and read the ground to her, because he had flown with her for 4 years and had never once in 4 years raised his voice in an aircraft. "Ma'am, you fly it," Rieger said on the second pass. "I'll count them on." The rounds came up through the floor. 2 of them went through her left leg above the knee, and she did not know it for 11 seconds, which is a thing that happens and that nobody believes until it happens to them. One of them took Rieger, and he did not make a sound, and the aircraft kept flying, because she kept flying it. She got them off the ground. She flew 40 minutes with her leg gone cold and the pedals wrong, and 11 people on the floor behind her, and a man in the left seat who had counted them on and could not count them off. Somewhere in the middle of those 40 minutes, the crew chief came up on the intercom and asked her, twice, whether she was hit, and she said no both times. And she was not lying, because she did not know. The boot filled up. That was how she found out. She landed it. She held it in a hover for 4 seconds at the end, because she wanted it flat and gentle, and not the last thing 11 people remembered. And then she put it down, and every one of the 11 walked away from that aircraft on their own feet. There was a ceremony afterward, in 2012, in a bare hall with 40 folding chairs. The Distinguished Flying Cross with the Valor device, the Purple Heart, Rieger's widow in the second row in a blue dress, holding a program. Then the medical board in 2013, and the end of the flying, and 16 years of service that stopped being a career and became a leg. What nobody knew, not the field, not the major, not the corps, was the small thing that had survived all of it. Long before any of that, as a young lieutenant, she had stood at a memorial where the honors were done badly. Volley late, flag folded twice, a family watching a detail get it wrong on the worst day of their lives. She had never been able to leave a ceremony alone since. She walked the ground the day before. Every time, every ceremony she had any hand in, for 29 years, she had come out and walked it with her own feet and looked at it with her own eyes. And on every parade field she ever walked, at some point, she paced off the same distance. 40 feet. Nose to tail. 11 people on the floor and 1 man in the left seat. She had done it in 11 countries and 4 commands, and nobody had ever once asked her what she was measuring. She turned the light off at 22:40. Somewhere on that installation, a barment memorandum sat in 31 inboxes, with her name misread at the top of it, and out on the field, the 6 guns were laid and covered for mourning. Review Day, 07:15. Mercer stood at the foot of the reviewing stand in a plain, dark suit, looking down the length of the field, and Prescott came around the end of the stand and saw the badge and the coat over her arm, and the way she stood on the left leg, and saw nothing else at all. "You," he said. "You were told. You were told twice, and then you were barred. There is a memorandum with your description on it." "I know what's on it," she said, which wasn't true yet, and which he did not hear. "You are going to walk to that rope." And then Major Dalton Prescott took a guest of the United States Army by the upper arm and turned her toward the rope. 4 feet away, Staff Sergeant Ruben Ocampo came off his gun. Nobody told him to. He had been standing at the ready position of a piece he was responsible for on a ceremonial morning, and he simply stepped off it, which is not a thing that happens. On the color guard, Corporal Wyatt Deschler took 1 step forward and stopped with his weight on the front foot and stayed there. 140 people saw it, and the thing they would all describe afterward wasn't the grab. It was that she did not move. Every one of them had a picture in their head, from a lifetime of films, of what a person does when they are grabbed. Pull, twist, say something. She did none of it. She stood exactly where she was with a man's hand closed on her sleeve, and let it be a fact in the world, and let 140 people look at it. The field went quiet, the way a field goes quiet, when the thing that has just happened is worse than the thing everybody was braced for. It is a specific quiet. It has a sound, and the sound is boots not moving. She did not pull the arm back. She looked at his hand on her sleeve. Then she looked up at him, and she smiled. The first time in 2 days, and the only time in this story, that Claudia Mercer smiled at anybody. "What's your name, Major?" "Prescott." He let go of her arm, because the smile did something to him he could not have described. "Put it in a complaint, ma'am, and see where it goes." "Prescott," she said. Nunley came around the end of the stand at a run he had not managed in 10 years, and got there in time to see her already walking, unhurried, 30 inches a step, toward the far side of the field, where 3 vehicles had come through the gate and were coming up the service road with their lights off. "Ma'am," Nunley called. She did not turn. Prescott straightened his cover. He told the battery to stand by. He looked at his watch. 40 minutes to arrival, honors. 0800 hours. The corps was set. 406 soldiers in formation, the band at the near end, the 6 guns of the salute battery on the flank with Ocampo standing at gun 1 and his section on the pieces, and the sun already hot on the back of everybody's neck. Lieutenant General Foster Quillen, 56 years old, commanding the corps, came up the steps of the reviewing stand, and did not take the center. He took the left and stood there and put his hands behind his back. Nunley, at the foot of the stand, saw that and understood it about half a second before anybody else on the field did, and the half second was the longest one he had ever spent. Then the flag went up. It ran up the staff beside the stand and broke out in the wind, and it was scarlet, and it was not any general officer's flag that had ever flown on that field. Dalton Prescott had spent 4 years in ceremonies and knew every flag in the United States Army by heart, knew them the way other men know cars, and he stood at his post 12 feet from the stand and looked at that flag and did not know it. The band came to attention. 4 ruffles and flourishes, then the honors march, then the first gun. The battery fired. 5 seconds between rounds, exactly as briefed, exactly as the packet said, the tubes going one after another down the line, and the sound humming back off the barracks, a beat late each time. 406 soldiers stood at attention and counted, because every one of them could count, because counting the guns is the oldest arithmetic in the Army. 11. That is a brigadier. 13. That is a major general. 15. And 15 is a lieutenant general, and there was a lieutenant general on the stand, and for 1 round, the field relaxed into the answer it had already worked out. 16. The field went strange. 17. Which is a 4-star, which is a general officer of the highest grade in the United States Army, and there was no 4-star on that stand, no 4-star on that installation, no 4-star within 400 miles. 18. And 18 is nothing. 18 belongs to nobody. 18 is a number that exists in the world for exactly 5 seconds on its way somewhere else. And every soldier on that grass knew where it was going. 19. Silence. 406 people stood absolutely still on a parade field, doing the same piece of arithmetic and arriving in the same place at the same moment, and the last echo came back off the barracks wall and died, and Lieutenant General Foster Quillen stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of the Army." She came up the steps of the reviewing stand in a plain dark suit with a coat over her arm. Prescott's face went through it in about 4 seconds, at a position of attention he could not break in front of his corps. Confusion first, a flat blankness, the mind refusing the sentence. Then disbelief, which is confusion with the arithmetic done. Then recognition, and recognition was the worst of the 4, because recognition was the coat, and the badge, and the gray afternoon light, and the 60 yards of grass, and his own voice coming back at him across 2 days. Then horror. He had used the word himself. He had shouted it across a parade field with his whole chest behind it, and he had been right. That was the thing. That was the part that would keep him awake for the rest of his life. He had been exactly right. She was a civilian. She was the senior civilian of the Department of the Army, the one the whole structure answers to, and there is precisely one civilian in the United States Army for whom the guns are fired 19 times. And he had put his hand on her arm at 07:15 in front of 140 witnesses. She took the center of the stand. She stood where the reviewing official stands, and she took the salute of 406 soldiers and did not look at Dalton Prescott once. The last echo came off the barracks. Prescott stood at attention with a hand that still remembered the weight of her arm. She did not stop the review. That was the first thing she said when Quillen offered, quietly, at her shoulder, while the formation waited. And what she said was that 400 soldiers had been standing on that grass since 06:30, and they were going to pass in review. So they passed in review, all of it, start to finish, properly, the way it is written. She stood for every element. She was on a leg that had 2 entry wounds in it, and she stood for 51 minutes, and the band played them off, and it was, several people said afterward, the best review that field had seen in years. Then she asked for 2 people by name. "Staff Sergeant Ocampo," she said, "your interval was short on Tuesday. It was not short today. Thank you." Ocampo said, "Ma'am," and could not get anything else out. "And the answer for the last round," she said, "is that you fire the last round, from the spare piece, on the same interval, and nobody in the stand ever knows. Somebody should have made you say that out loud 12 years ago. That is not your failure, Sergeant." "Yes, ma'am." Sergeant Major Nunley, "I understand you paced my footprints." Nunley admitted that he had. "How far did you make it?" 40 feet, ma'am. Give or take." "Give or take," she said, and something went across her face and was gone. "That's closer than most." The rest took 90 seconds. Lieutenant General Quillen relieved Major Dalton Prescott for cause, on the field, with the formation still in place, which is a thing that is done perhaps once in a Corps commander's career. But the relief was not the reckoning. The relief was housekeeping. Because here is the part that mattered, and every lawyer in the case would say it the same way. Being rude to a civilian is not a crime. An officer shouting at a guest on a parade field is a bad day, and a bad file and an apology. It is not a charge. If Dalton Prescott had only barked, and only laughed, and only put his hand on her arm, he would have finished his 20 and drawn a pension. The charge was the memorandum. 2 lawful instructions refused, escorted from the field by ceremonial detail personnel, signed, dated, and pushed to 31 addressees by a commissioned officer who had watched the opposite happen with his own eyes. That is a false official statement, and the Army has an article for it, and it has teeth. Staff Sergeant Reuben Ocampo still had the email. So did the other 30 addressees, which is the trouble with a distribution list. A man who lies to one person has told one lie, and a man who lies to 31 has made 31 copies of the evidence and mailed them out himself. And once investigators started pulling the ceremonies office apart, other things came out of it. There was Mrs. Odette Frayne, 68 years old, who had been turned off that same field the previous spring, the day of a memorial review, in the rain, for standing too close to the rope. Her son's name is on the wall at the far end of that parade ground. She had driven 310 miles to be there, and she had gone home the same afternoon, and she had not come back to the installation since. She came back for this. She sat in the second row at the hearing in a blue coat, with her hands in her lap, and when they asked her what she remembered, she said she remembered being told she was in the way. She said it without heat. She said she had assumed, at the time, that she was. There were 11 ceremonial soldiers signed out on official duty rosters, across 2 years, for work that was performed at the Major's quarters. And there was Corporal Wyatt Deschler, 22 years old, who was not asked and who was not on anybody's list, and who walked into the investigator's office on his own on a Thursday afternoon. "Sir," Deschler said, "I want it on the record that I laughed. When the major made the joke about her leg, I made one too, and people heard me make it. I would like that written down with the rest of it." The investigator asked him if he understood he was not under suspicion. "Yes, sir," Deschler said. "Write it down anyway. If you have ever stood in a room and watched somebody get away with it and had to keep your face still, that is what this channel is about. If that landed, take the second it costs and subscribe to Honor Tales. There is another one of these tomorrow." Dusk. The field was empty. The guns were gone. The grass was flattened in 406 places, and the light was going long and orange across it from the barracks end. Claudia Mercer came out in the gray coat, with Command Sergeant Major Nunley walking beside her, and she went to the families area behind the rope, and she paced it off. 8 steps out. Turn. 8 steps back. 30 inches a step on a bad leg in the dark grass. 40 feet. Nunley had been carrying the question for 2 days, and he finally set it down. "Ma'am, what is it you're pacing off?" She finished the last 8 steps before she answered, because she always finished. "A helicopter." She told him the rest, standing in the middle of the flattened grass in the failing light. 40 feet. Nose to tail. 2011. 11 people on the floor and a man in the left seat who said he would count them on, and who did not get to count them off. "I walk the ground before a ceremony," she said. "Everyone, since I was a lieutenant." She looked down the length of the field. "You would not believe how often the interval is short." Nunley said, "Yes, ma'am, I would." They stood there a while. Out past the far end, the wall with the names on it had gone dark against the sky. "Sergeant Major," she said, "nobody asked my name for 2 days. 400 people in a memorandum, and not one person asked." She started back toward the vehicles. "Fix that." "Not for me." "Yes, ma'am." Walking back toward the vehicles, her phone went once in her coat pocket. A message. No name on it. No country code on the number. "Crescent. The ground here is bad, and the interval is long." Oracle 9. She stopped in the middle of the parade field. Oracle 9 had been her flight lead for 2 years, and had been carried as missing since a border crossing in 2014, and had been carried that way for 12 years, and there was a name on a wall about that, too. She read it twice. At the tree line, 60 yards out, 2 men in civilian jackets stood up. She put the phone in her coat pocket. She looked once down the length of the empty field, the whole 400 feet of it, grass going gray in the last of the light. Then she started walking. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.